What's up, everybody? Well, I'm having a quick moment to make a video, and I know the strobe light is happening again because that's just the nature of the beast. Um, you can't, the light doesn't just go from working to not working all of a sudden. It's a period of, hours of strobing or going on and off, in the meantime. So, what I want to talk about in this video, I'll have a quick minute, is I want to say that, I just keep making these songs. And I mean, they literally bring me to tears. And as you can imagine, since I just have a naturally negative outlook on things, I'm not going to be showing it. But I've been working on one of my books that I do, my little books that hopefully no one will ever find. And what I mean by that is because my birthday is coming up, every year I try to challenge myself to do at least one paper art project. Because what happened, you see, and that's what my latest song is about, is when I was younger, it used to be that not a day went by when I was a younger kid that I didn't draw something on paper. I mean, we're talking, I used to do multiple drawings a day. Because, see, you got to remember, the internet wasn't around in the 90s. And, we didn't get it in our house until 2006. But I was not an outdoorsy kid by any stretch of the imagination. I hated being outdoors. I hated the heat. Did not have a single solitary kid that I could call my friend other than my younger sister. And she was 9 years my junior. And there wasn't much we could really do together. So I would draw. And, these drawings kind of took on a life of their own. It's amazing how, once upon a time, there were so many drawings that you couldn't hardly close one of the drawers because I would waste so much paper and so many colors and pencils, and man, did I draw when I was younger. But then there came a time, and for a younger child, and that's what I'm saying in this song, elementary school, my artwork was all the rage. Like, people would be, come draw this, come draw that for me. Like, we'd have these projects once a week that involved art. We'd have a weekly art class in elementary school, which wasn't graded. It was just, you did art for an hour instead of whatever else you were going to do. And it was normally Friday. So everybody loved my artwork. I was all the rage in elementary school, partly from being redshirted, put in school a year late, like so many moms failed to do with their kids. So my art was fantastic for a grade school girl. And, once again, I've had to block more accounts with, wanting to subdivide childhood in ways that I disagree with. I think childhood should be broken up into thirds, because there were only two really important turning points in my childhood from my perspective. There was age 6 going into kindergarten because I was redshirted and didn't go at 5. Then there was age 13 wherein I became a teenager and became obsessed with my 7th grade male teacher. Never had a male teacher as a regular teacher before until then, and he became an obsession very quickly, being 6'5" and amazing. But so, ages 6 and ages 13 are the only really dividers that should exist in childhood as far as what you call someone. They're a younger child below age 6, they're an older child from 6 through 12, and they're a teenager from 13 through 17. Really, 2 years into adulthood, 18 and 19, they should be. They're a young adult. So, those are the only markers that should really matter. Puberty is irrelevant because it happens at all different ages for different people. And, it can be faster, slower. Different things can happen at different times and so on. So, when I was younger, artwork was amazing. When I was a little bitty kid, I would just do one scribble on a sheet of paper and run a coloring book that way. Just scribble all over a character and laugh about how I'd run the picture when I was under 6. Okay, when I was 6 through 12, because I was redshirted, my artwork was just amazing. For my age, because I was a year older, than most of my classmates. So they were really comparing apples to oranges and didn't know it. You know, a first grader who is 6 and a first grader who is 7 are somewhat different. Same with a 5th grader being 10 or 11. So I had wonderful art skills going into middle school, 6th grade, 7th grade, even 8th grade. But here's what happened. My art skills kind of peaked around 97, the summer between 7th and 8th grade, when I drew, you know, to get my mind off of no longer being in that teacher's class and wanting to end it all. So, do not know what the noise was. Stupid air conditioner. See, I have to live in a stupid southern state. But anyway, so wonderful art skills going into my teens. But because I stagnated somewhere around the 9th or 10th grade, it became very obvious that while I could still draw well, I was not improving. And I've made a video about this before. How right around the time that my adult height was achieved, you know, I'm pretty sure I haven't grown any taller since about 14. Been just shy of 5'4", never quite made 5'4". Right around the time I achieved my final adult height by 14, you know, just like the unfortunate pitch and timbre of my voice, my art skills pretty much stagnated and didn't change anymore. They've gotten slightly better, you know, but they really didn't improve in the ways that my teachers were trying to push me to improve. And they said some really ugly, hurtful, hateful things to me. Like, ew, that looks like a coloring book. And a part of me wishes I'd kept more of my adolescent drawings. But it was like I just became so very ashamed of my artwork, my paper art, that it just about died out. I just about stopped doing any paper artwork whatsoever. Because it wasn't so much the drawings that I was ashamed of as the write-ups that I would do. It was almost like my drawings were kind of very elementary, you know, rushed through coloring book style so that I could hurry up and write some stupid dialogue and stories about the pictures. You know what I'm saying? They're more like a comic book or a coloring book or a funny paper, so to speak, you know, inspired by the funnies. Cartoon characters saying and doing things that they would never do on TV. And that was the whole point of it. I was drawing them because I would never see an episode necessarily of them doing the things I had them doing, and more importantly, saying the things about these things that I had them saying. So I was drawing to give myself something I couldn't have. You know, a lot of it was like self-insert characters. I call it indie rugrats, you know, indie characters meaning individualistic. I decided what this character was going to be, even though he only appeared one time, and may not have even had a name. So I would do my own art, and I started to get some really negative feedback about halfway through my teens, like around 15 and 16. I went from having almost a guaranteed 100, you know, straight A's in art in middle school. But then when I got to high school, it's like I had an A that first 6 weeks. But then as the year progressed, my freshman year, even though she was a nice teacher, I started to make B's of all things. And it started to really, you know, make my teens a horrible time. You know, 7th grade wasn't the only bad year in my teens. But, you know, I started to have really low self-esteem because it's like this one area where I'd been good was suddenly debatable. Suddenly I might be a B student, you know, if I don't do it, you know, quite to this expectation. And my cousin, on the other hand, my male cousin, you know, we'd always been, I'd say our art skills were relatively similar, even though he was a year younger than me throughout elementary school. But man, when his voice dropped, you know, around his freshman year, age 14, when he should have been redshirted and only been an 8th grader, man, his art skills just skyrocketed. Like, they were already getting good in middle school, but man, did they become photorealistic, almost like a black and white photo. But the only criticism I have is the subjects that he chose to draw were just very dark and gory and, you know, like military superheroes, like action movies, like R-rated action movies for men, you know, because you could tell what we watched from our drawings. You know, he watched a lot of, you know, heavy R, violent movies for adult men, whereas I was drawing silly kitty cartoons. And I was ashamed of that. And it got to the point where I just didn't even draw. I didn't draw at all. I'd go through some years, if not 5-year periods, where I did not draw one thing on paper. The only thing I may have done was create some kind of a file on the computer, because it was easier to hide that kind. You see, I could hide things on a computer file, on a computer disk, and give them a strange name that was very vague and not descriptive of what was in the picture. And in the days before, you had thumbnails, you just had file names and sizes. It was easy to hide those from my parents. They didn't have to know what a picture was by the name. I could put the date in a letter or something. So, I'm sharing my art. I made a song about it. And I really just don't care. If my art style is like a coloring book for the rest of my life, if I was ever going to change who I am to please other people, it would have been when my girl classmates were wanting to give me makeovers to make me more like them. But at this point in my life, I'm in my 40s. I turned 43, and I'm in the F all the way off. If you don't like me and the things I do, you can F all the way off. So I'll go ahead and post this video. What's up, everybody? I don't know if I'm going to tack this video on to the end of the other video, but I have another moment to myself, which is rare. And so here I have this pencil sharpener. And I just wanted to say, I may have ended the other one abruptly. Might be wearing different sunglasses, but I have since been burned. I don't know if you can see that. But I now have a blister from cooking. And that's just one of the many reasons why I'm just not one of these people. If I'm fat, it certainly isn't because I'm just hungry all the time, always fixing food, always cooking. Well, no, if it was up to me, hell, I could lose a lot of weight if it was up to just me. Because, it's like I accidentally touched the edge of that pan and it burned me. And there's nothing like learning how to cook and fix your own food that will dull your appetite and just make you crave things that don't involve cooking. And that's one thing, that started happening. It's like all throughout my life, I've had these weight fluctuations. And a lot of the reason I'm fat is because I have no metabolism. No metabolism. And, once I pack on the weight, it's like I can't really burn it off, And I started to say, I was not an outdoorsy kid. I was just terrified of bugs. I don't like the heat. I don't like the bugs. And I didn't have any friends growing up. So, who would I have played sports with? With no friends whatsoever. So, I want to talk about that and how my art skills just kind of stagnated. And, I'm in that, as I stated before, the F all the way off stage of development. Just like with my curtains, you don't like my short drapes, how they don't drag the floor. Like the original ones I threw away that came with the house. They were full of roach poop. If you don't like, things that I do, you can just F all the way off. And, I have just reached that stage in my lifespan. And I think that's what really happened with my art was that, it's like I kind of peaked, around the age of 13, 14. I want to say the 8th grade, as I got positive feedback on how good it was. And I don't know if you can see this, but I have a few artworks in frames. That's one of my arts, that weird looking thing over there. That's something I painted for this very art teacher who had nothing but negative things to say about art. And I've actually made those little space pictures. I bought some sticker sheets with space theme and put stickers just randomly. And, and just various things I've done, to have something on my wall. But it's like I sort of grew a backbone. And that, was the thing in puberty that I guess that's the worst part of puberty, is when all your physical changes are pretty much behind you and you start to grow a backbone, so to speak. You start to question authority and, Dad isn't God just because he's taller than you. And, it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's very rough. Very rough because it's like, parents want you to still be a kid because you're under 18, but you don't feel like a kid anymore. You don't look or sound like a kid in the case of males. You just don't feel like you should be a kid anymore. You feel like you should be driving and making your own decisions, but, people still want to hold you back and say, hey, kid, do what I say. And so I started to grow a backbone. And it's like once I started getting these negative comments about my art, rather than make me want to improve and do better and think, wow, what should I do to this art to make this teacher finally like it? How much more shading do I need to make it look realistic? Oh, I need to get an art book and read it all night long, in addition to all my other 8 hours of freaking homework. Well, maybe not that much, but a lot. Oh, I need to learn to do better, to be more like Rembrandt and all these wonderful artists of the past. Well, no. When you get to be 15 and 16, it's like you grow a backbone. You start to not kowtow to authority in the same way, and that creates a lot of friction. And it's like you just, like I'm at the IDGAF stage in my 40s. I'm going to be 43 on June 19th, so my comfy chair was now written by a boy younger than me. That feels weird, to know that there are classmates of mine that are now older than this teacher that I thought was God, at least at the beginning of the year. And that's another thing. That's why he was so hot to me, because he was like, he came into my life right at the end of that stage wherein adults were still like gods. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if I'd had him maybe 1 year later or 2 years later, like if he'd have been a high school teacher, I may not have had such a high opinion of him anymore. Because as I've stated before, you get well into your teens, like old enough to drive a car. And I probably had tall guys who were my college professors and, former coaches. They were hot, but they didn't have that status that he had in my mind, because I had left behind that stage where adults are just automatically superior just because they're adults. And, it's like people told me my art sucked. Well, I just stopped drawing. It makes you want to shut down. You get to an age where it's like, I don't have to take this anymore. This person may not even be taller than me. Like this teacher, she was shorter than me. So, I don't know. I'm in the stage where you can like it, you can hate it, but I really don't care. Really do not care. And I will not call children anything but younger children, older children, and teenagers. You have Rugrats, you have Cub Scouts, and then you have adolescents or teenagers. Kindergarten to first grade, 6th grade and 7th grade, those are the only turning points that I recognize in childhood. I don't recognize preschoolers, preteens. I think that's so stupid, to make kids think in the 4th grade that they're big stuff now, just because they're entering their 2nd decade or they're halfway through their legal minor years. Well, they're not. They're still freaking children. And before I lose this opportunity, I'll go ahead and post this video. So you can like it, you can hate it, or you can just F all the way off.